The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. You're scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat on my row. We'll let you in to prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's good to have you along for the ride on this Wednesday, November 1st. Thursday, November 2nd, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night, as we are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, situated in Spaced Out Radio headquarters, as we are here for you 7 days a week. We welcome everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listeners. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music? Get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, we're all over the place. We're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on Spreaker, Revolution Radio, or on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or if you're on Twitter, just go to the hashtag SpacedOutRadio, and I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. You can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Read the Encounter online, dealing with everything paranormal. Read up on my latest blog. If you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report, and we got great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. The paranormal field of research can probably be described with one word: anarchic. That's it. Many may not agree with that, but with no rulebook or formal guideline and absolutely no laws governing this field, we see so many different people investigating so many different ways and claim science as their reason for what they do. Yet most haven't done science since early in high school. But is it time for some sort of governing body to control the paranormal? Is it even possible? What about cryptids like Sasquatch? Do we really need to hunt this creature down? Aliens? Is it just about the government? Tonight, we have the man they call the Paranormal Lawyer. Michael W. Hall is based out of Washington State. Having a lifelong interest in UFOs and the paranormal, Michael claims to be an experiencer himself. Hall has been a field investigator for APRO, legal counsel for the National UFO Reporting Center, and a research associate for NARCAP, as well as a consultant for MUFON. He is now part of the UFOiTeam in Washington State as well. Michael, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. How are you doing, my friend?
Dave, I'm doing great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. That's great.
Oh, no problem. Now, for the audience, for them to know, you and I actually met at Eric Cooper's Forest Moon Paracon back in September. And, you know, we wanted to chat. We had a few minutes. We both wanted more time to talk, and it just didn't come to fruition because you had to get back down to Seattle. But on the flip side, here we are. And you have now come on as a guest, which is a good thing.
Oh, definitely. This is what we wanted to do a long time ago. Just you and I kicking back with our fuzzy slippers and something to drink and talk about all the interesting paranormal issues out there that need to be discussed because it's a huge field. And I've, of course, been involved and interested in all things Fortean, basically, my whole life. And I know you have too. So this is fun for me. I'm really going to enjoy this.
Michael, let's look at your story a little bit so people can get familiar with you. What got you into this field?
You know, basically, I have always been interested in the paranormal, in UFOs, Bigfoots, all those things, ever since a kid. I don't know when, I didn't point to an experience as a child that kind of put me on the path. I just have always been interested in that. And then as I got older, I'd get more involved. Like you mentioned, I was the first thing I did was join APRO back in the 70s and became a field investigator for those guys, Jim and Coral Lawrenson. based out of Arizona there. And that kind of got my eyes open to all the unique things that were going on in the field of ufology. Then, of course, I did some other things. I actually met Peter Davenport over 22 years ago now from the National UFO Reporting Center. I seem to kind of just run into people periodically throughout my career and decide to, it's like yourself, we clicked. And so we worked together, and I've been Peter Davenport's attorney for the last 22 years, helping him on all of his legal issues that might pop up here and again for the National UFO Reporting Center, which are not a whole lot, but there's some interesting stories that we've gone through over the years. Fighting with NIDS for one thing, National Institute of Discovery Science, and making sure that Peter was involved in all of the different sightings that could be gleaned throughout the United States. And then up till probably 2012, I would have just said, I'm just one of those guys who have always been interested in this field but have never really seen anything dramatic. I think we've all seen interesting lights in the night sky, and we couldn't, decide what they were. But I had a sighting myself, January 10th of 2012, that was kind of dramatic, right over my house here in Edmonds, Washington. So if we have time, we can discuss that later. But we've got a whole litany of stuff to go through here, and I just appreciate the opportunity to kick back, relax, and enjoy this evening with you.
Well, how did you get the moniker, the Paranormal Lawyer?
Well, that's a good question, because there's not a whole lot of paranormal lawyers. I basically kind of have been interested in all these just various 14 fields over the years. And, people in my area of the law, when you, are in a bar association and you have clients and or partners. I had a law firm with 5 legal partners at one point, a couple paralegals and a bookkeeper, and we had one of the largest firms in our local county here. And you don't get a chance to talk about these things very often, but slowly but surely people realize and understand that you are interested in this field. And so it's kind of like around the water cooler, kind of like gossip. Oh, yeah, he's the paranormal lawyer. Talk to him.
Is it a name that you kind of enjoy using, or is it something that you just kind of roll your eyes at when you hear it now?
No, it's, I'm very serious in this field. I mean, this is, as a lawyer, I'm trained to think analytically. And it's interesting when you go to law school, you hear this idea what they're going to do is destroy your brain, bring it down to mush, and then they're going to build you right back up the way they need you to think. So, for instance, you could take this case or a case and jump on either side of the fence and do a good job representing this client, whether you're a defense or a prosecutor, whatever. So I bring that to this field. I have always been skeptical, but discerning as you go through the information that's out there. All the things on the internet, of course, you've got to wonder where they come from and who's behind them, who posts them, and all those kinds of things. But if you can be discerning enough and go to different sources, you kind of get a feel, basically, of what reality is out there. My feeling is that reality is in a quickening mode right now. Things are happening so fast. It's what I call a soft disclosure. And I'm trying to bring that critical thinking to this whole field so that we can get on the right track and bring everyone else along with us.
And I do have to preface that you are also a consultant/lawyer for Spaced Out Radio as well in helping us grow and expand our U.S. market. So I do want to let the public know that on full disclosure, because we do disclose things around here, not like other paranormal groups. But nonetheless, it is going to be, an interesting, growth period for us around here, which I know you're excited for as well, Mike.
Oh, yeah. No, I am just pleased as punch to be on board here with Spaced Out Radio and your career, because this is the beginning, I believe, for you, Dave, and a whole new opening of your market, your abilities to reach people here in the country, here in the U.S., and I'm the guy that I'm going to try to help you do that, along with your other team, of course. You've got a lot of folks that are working for you down here and pulling for you. So I'm excited to be here in kind of the beginning of a new era for Dave Scott and Spaced Out Radio.
Well, we're just going to see where it goes. Can't do much else but just watch now, man. It's out of the hands. It's out of the hands. Just got to keep putting together some not bad radio. And that's the main thing.
Yeah.
But let's get to the whole paranormal aspect, and I'm saying paranormal as using it as an umbrella term here. You work mainly with UFOs, but do you enjoy the ghostly side of things or the cryptid side of things? Being in Washington State and near Seattle, you have both quite frequent.
Oh, yes. Matter of fact, we are pretty famous down here in this neck of the woods for our ghost tours. As you know, downtown Seattle has an underground Seattle that a lot of people have no clue about. Of course, Seattle, like many large cities, was destroyed by fire a couple times. The whole city basically burned up, so they just built right on top of it a couple stories. And down below in the depths, underground Seattle, there are catacombs, there are old streets even, and they have these ghost tours that go throughout the area. They're very popular. People just love them, let alone some of the wonderful seaport communities that we have, Port Townsend, all these different little communities that have their own stories of how the pioneers began, their whole community down there, and some of them and their old graveyards are awesome to check out as well. My feeling on the whole ghost thing is that we are just becoming a little bit more aware of what reality is for us, because our three dimensions that we are used to seeing and interacting with, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg on what reality is. And reality is, I believe, that people out there, individuals like you and myself, maybe for eons, have kind of kept their presence known in the areas that they were in when they were living. So it's exciting for me to be able to find out how that works, what they're doing here, and how we can interact with them for mutual benefit, hopefully.
I do have to ask you a law question. I know you're not familiar with Canadian law, but up here, Sasquatch investigator Todd Standing, as of last week, actually filed paperwork in British Columbia court for a civil suit against the British Columbia government for acknowledging that Sasquatch actually lives in the province.
Yes.
Have you followed that?
I have. I'm amazed and excited to see how this works. I mean, this is a fantastic career move for anybody who is out there hunting for Bigfoot. What I heard from Todd in the articles that I've read is that he's actually talked with a couple lawyers, and they believe that he has a good case. Now, I would love to be able to talk with one of those lawyers and say, wow, what kind of case are you going to bring to try to prove this? I think in reality, it would be very difficult for a prosecutor, for instance, in the county government or any other kind of county entity to be able to, fight this thing or come out with evidence against the existence of Bigfoot. So I think it's a great move on Todd's part to actually just bring this thing to light more than usual, by bringing it into the legal arena and seeing what can happen of it. It might be that the prosecutors or the entities are successful in trying to get this thing just thrown out of court, with a motion for dismissal or something like that. But even just that is going to allow for some publicity and a different kind of level of scrutiny that would not normally be coming across our media in this regard. So anything we can do to kind of bring the light to bear on this whole subject, Bigfoot specifically, because we are here in the Northwest, all of us, and it's a whole new society of individuals, I believe, who are actually there and maybe dimensional, maybe not, but there's been too many people citing the figures, the sounds, the smells, all of those things to discount, I believe, their existence.
The only thing that concerns me is that Todd has a new Bigfoot documentary coming out called Discovering Bigfoot, and I'm wondering if he is thinking of putting taxpayer dollars on the line here to try and promote his cause, because that to me is concerning as a British Columbia taxpayer, that our courts are going to have some of our taxpayer dollars eaten up by somebody who's trying to self-promote his own documentary. That's my only concern with this court case. Would you see that as a promotional gag?
I would imagine that he would deny any kind of promotional tie-in to his upcoming documentary. But let's just throw it out there and say, okay, yeah, maybe it is, okay? But you got to weigh the whole factor here of how much taxpayer money goes to frivolous causes that we could care less about and or we don't want to spend our money doing, as opposed to probably the piddly amount of money that would be thrown at this thing by the government to deal with Todd's lawsuit. It's just outrageous how minimal the impact would be to anybody's taxes if they were just having a prosecutor look into this thing or spending a little time. You got to realize that the entities that are involved with this thing are paying these prosecutors a salary anyway. They're just doing their job 9 to 5. Matter of fact, one of my first jobs out of law school was clerking in the prosecutor's office. These folks are great lawyers and they know their job, but they're not like eating up a whole bunch of money that would be extra on a case because they're just doing their job anyway. I think it's just probably going to do nothing but bring more information to us, or to the public, actually, because we all know what's going on, the people that are involved in this field. But what we need to do is spread the word a lot wider than we have ever done, and hopefully this will be the result.
Very understandable. My question is, what if he wins? What if he wins?
Yeah.
Because British Columbia has about 71% is forest and trees. We don't know the habitat. British Columbia is an export province for minerals, for iron ore, for wood product. Now, this has the potential that if he did win, that much like Washington State, which relies heavily on forestry, this could cause a huge economic impact to the financial structure of the province.
Well, I don't know if it would be a huge financial impact, but even if it was, I guess you would weigh that against the whole idea of an unknown species being impacted reversely if we didn't figure out this whole process. The whole idea of us on this planet living off of our fossil fuels and our trees and our natural resources, as this Tom DeLonge interview just came out, with the announcement that there are all sorts of interesting alternatives to energy and stuff. We're way beyond that anyway. I'm assuming it will probably impact some jobs in the area of forestry or whatever. But I believe the whole system has been depressed and sequestered over the years anyway, with the alternative fuel and resources that we do have. And that's just going to allow people to go over to another field and do something else for a living that might be less environmental impact, on the planet. That's what we need to do anyway.
But that puts a lot of people out of work right off the bat.
Well, I would imagine that the lobbyists for those industries would have a lot to say about the fact that there could be a new cryptid, a new whatever we're going to do, describe the new life form if it's found or proved. For instance, they're going to be involved in this process too, to make sure that they can mitigate any loss of jobs and unions and all sorts of things. It's going to be a collaborative effort no matter what. But I think it's going to be worth it.
Well, you know what? I would say if there was an alternative, I could see it worth it. But I mean, the thing that kind of bothers me about it, and I'm not an environmentalist, but I'm not a big supporter of using natural resources either. I kind of fall down the middle. I could go either way. I look at the community I live in. I mean, if it wasn't for the lumber mills here, this town would be a ghost town. And that is the reality of it. Like during the forest fires here, they were fighting tooth and nail to protect those two mills, because if the mills went up, the companies already said they're already dilapidated and out of age. So if they burn down, we're not replacing them. And that's not good for a small community that is reliant on those mills for work and your population. Yeah. And when I look, British Columbia has numerous towns like that. And without really knowing, and hey, I'm someone who has seen Bigfoot. Okay, I've been within 100 feet of two of them. We've found footprints over here. We're going to check our gifting site on Friday, aren't we, Corey? Because I know Corey's listening. Nice. But the whole point that I'm saying is we don't know anything about this creature. We haven't tracked its habitat, what it eats, what it drinks, obviously water. But is it near water? Is it not? How does it move? Does it migrate south for the winter? We don't know anything about this creature. And to have the potential where if Todd Standing maybe won this court case, where we have to do now environmental assessments on this, yes, I agree that the creature should be protected. But how do you protect the creature? Could it be something where it should be maybe one step at a time? Like even throw the guy a bone and say, look, you know what? We don't know what its environment is. We'll allow for studying of this creature, but we're going to protect it. So that way shows like killing Bigfoot or people who are out hunting just can't go and try and blow one away and make their $1 million. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum for sure. It's been one of those issues that people in the animal rights industry have been working on for years with other species, and the environmentalists and different strategies on how to survive in both sides of the fence there. So it is going to be interesting. But I tell you what, probably the best thing that's going to come out of this, I hope, is just more discussion on this issue, because it hasn't been put in front of the public very often and in a form that could be seriously talked about. So I'm looking forward to that. And I would like to meet the lawyer who's involved with this thing. It sounds like he is quite a character. At least he's got a legal mind that thinks that this could be put forward as a good case, and he's going to be arguing it before an independent, fair-minded judge. So we'll see.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Could you see a lawsuit like that happening in Washington State, where, of course, between British Columbia and California, where that whole Cascadia area is known for Sasquatch sightings?
Oh, you got it. I mean, the Olympic Peninsula, all of those kinds of places here, even in eastern Washington, by the way, the Blue Mountains and the Palouse, there's sightings all over the place I could see that if this thing doesn't get just shut down immediately, Todd Standing's lawsuit, that there could be, other things that pop up in other states that would be, natural to do, obviously. It would be some way to get an environmentalist-type lawyer person involved in these kinds of things as well. There's not a whole lot of lawyers out there that represent cryptids, that's for sure. So
now, let's say he won. Could you then see that impact from Todd Standing possibly winning this court case to it having some sort of impact on what happens in Washington State, maybe Oregon, or even California?
Well, obviously, the powers that be behind the large forestry services and companies would take a quick second look at this whole idea, and of course, their lobbyists would be working overtime to try to minimize the impact of any kind of a similar lawsuit or similar codified law here in the state of Washington. Of course, they always did that with a spotted owl already, those kinds of things. So you don't see the forestry industry shutting down just because we've got, species to be protected within the environment. So it will work itself out for sure. But I think the overarching idea here is that if we have an actual entity that is living on our planet that we have no idea about, in this, Bigfoot whole situation, we need to find out what let's put it the other way. The reverse issue is that what if we wiped out every Bigfoot, or that whole kind of scenario happens on our planet? What would be the ramifications of that? We have no clue about that. So it's going to be interesting, but I could see it happening down here in the States too.
Well, we'll definitely have to keep in touch with that. Now, with your investigative experience that you have had in Washington State, of course, with Mount St. Helens, have you ever looked into the paranormal past that Washington State has? Because so much has happened in that state. The term flying saucers came from there. There's rumors that Chinook helicopters were picking up to see Sasquatch along the trails of the recently erupted back in 1980 Mount St. Helens, when the mountainside came down and Ape Canyon was absolutely destroyed. Have you looked into a lot of these stories?
I have not looked into the deceased Sasquatch stories, but that is very interesting, and you would think that would be definitely something that was an issue at the time. Not let alone, Mr. Truman, who died up there on the mountain, but a lot of other folks were caught in that by surprise, let alone bears and deer and all sorts of wildlife. So you can imagine such a widespread thing happening instantly on the mountain could definitely take care of any kind of cryptid up there. And, of course, there is a, conspiracy kind of government issue going on along here, I believe, that they don't want us to know about these things at this point. It kind of goes along with the UFO disclosure as well, is that there are certain things they got to keep us in the dark on until they can kind of slowly acclimate us all to these issues. No, I haven't looked into that for sure, but all of the other amazing things that have gone on here in this state, like you were mentioning, the Kenneth Arnold sighting in 1947. We got the Maury Islands sighting of UFOs back even before that, a couple weeks before. It's just amazing. There's a friend of mine, Vince Yanunza, who actually has Northwest Weird, and his whole video productions are involved with this whole idea of pulling out the unique things that are happening here in our state and kind of getting them out to the public. So I'm really liking what he's doing, and I'm always interested in these kinds of issues myself. The whole state is an amazing place to be. If we've got Sasquatches over here on the Olympic Peninsula, And we've got UFO hotspots in eastern Washington around Yakima, Walla Walla, the Blue Hills, all those kinds of things. And, of course, the different ghost issues that we've got, with the professional ghost hunters using the, technology to find out that there are entities and different things happening that we can't see. I'm amazed that we're living in this place, this neck of the woods, because it seems to be kind of a spot where things congregate somehow. You hear about these elsewhere in the country, different places in the Midwest, East Coast, those kinds of things, but it seems like the state of Washington and the Pacific Northwest have a little bit of everything right here.
It definitely is a beautiful place. And, I took a scenic route on my way down to the Forest Moon Paracon with our Keith Andrews, Corey Greaves, and Kerry Mingo, part of my paranormal investigation team up here. And we actually came down about, halfway across the state. I forget the little town. Starts with an O. I think there was a gas station, and that was about it. But we hopped on.
Omak.
That's the one. Omak. And
Omak, it's a beautiful place up there.
Yes. If you ever want to cross the border into the United States, all you have to do in order to get them off their game is say, I'm going ghost hunting.
That would do it. Especially those border guys. They don't have a sense of humor, guys.
Well, the funny part about it is they actually, I've done it twice now, going down to Cooper's Paracon. And both times I get a muffled laugh, and they're like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yes, and I believe in Sasquatch too." And that just sets them right off. And next thing you know, a couple minutes later, after some strange questions, they let you through the border. But we took Highway 20 or I-20 across to Concrete, Washington, and I'll tell you what a beautiful scenery that was. And all the little towns in there, I was surprised, all the little towns along the way, everything is Sasquatch there. Everything is about Sasquatch. So this is a big creature in Washington State around the Mount Baker area.
Yes, exactly. They've got, if you've got a tree that you're cutting down in front of your business or your front yard, you carve it into a Sasquatch. That's what they do. It's amazing. They're all over the place. And, of course, some of those chainsaw artists are awesome, the way they do it.
It is amazing indeed. Well, let's get into tonight's topic, because I did want to get into this with you. In the intro to the show, Mike, we talked about, and you and I talked earlier today, about the site and stage of the paranormal right now. Or I should say the state of the paranormal, pardon me. And this is a field that has never had a rule book. This is a field that has never had any governing laws, has never had any sort of code of conduct that goes along with it. We've seen people use and discover their own investigative techniques, whether it's for ghosts or cryptids or something along those lines. Do you think it's time that there were people to gather around and maybe write up some sort of code of conduct to make this plausible, so that way there was a set of rules or guidelines for people to use?
I think you're right on target there, Dave. As I mentioned a little bit earlier in our interview here, I believe there's a quickening happening in the paranormal field. UFOs, cryptids, any kind of unique Fortean knowledge, it seems to be happening so fast. The revelations are coming so fast that this is typically when you actually start thinking of that kind of thing, of coming up with a codification of the actual activity, the ethics involved in how to deal with these issues. Obviously, people are doing their own thing, and some folks are doing an excellent job of that. Eric Cooper's a good example right there with his organization, and of course your organization is stellar. No one would come after the ethics of any of those organizations that we know, But of course, some people out there are trying to do it on their own and really don't know what they're doing. And the theory could be that you might harm folks in certain areas if you don't know what you're doing. And of course, that goes to the knowledge in the field, but also it goes to how you treat individuals when you're dealing with them in this whole field as well. And of course, as an attorney, we all have our ethical guidelines that we have to follow, as well as being a good advocate for your client. You have to follow certain ethical guidelines in a canonical approach of codifying laws and or abilities to do certain things in a certain way. And with all the knowledge that is out there, it would be really good to get some folks together to talk about those things, kind of bring people along too that really don't know the issues as well.
Many people will say it's way too late, that the popularity of the paranormal is so high right now that you would almost have to wait for a giant lull to happen that happens in anything that is trendy. I mean, whether it's music, whether it's baseball cards, there's always a trend. You know what I'm saying? Where the value decreases. Do we have to wait for that to happen before somebody could put together some sort of code of conduct that could create a system that ghost hunters need to follow?
Well, this might be a parallel situation where MUFON came along to be the national kind of investigation authority, or at least entity that covers all the states in ufology. They haven't come up with codes of conduct, basically, in that regard, but they have field investigators' manuals. They have suggestions on how to approach an investigation. So at first, what you would do probably is come up with codes of conduct in a manual for the paranormal. And these are certain things that you need to watch out for, certain things that would be good to follow in your investigations. So basically, at first, you've got to have some kind of suggestions. And I don't believe it's too late because, there was a lot of UFO investigation going on before any of the major ufological organizations came up with their guidelines on how to become a field investigator. This might be a good time to start doing this. I'm kind of looking forward to getting involved with that if possible.
Do you think, though, that this field of research, and let's stick with paranormal ghost hunting for right now, do you believe this field of research has the brain power and capacity to actually sit at a table and hammer out some sort of code of conduct? Many people would say no, because there are so many people that are aloof, people going into investigations drunk or high or making up evidence and spoofing television programs, or if they are somewhat serious about it, pissing off the ghosts to the point where worse things happen to the client afterwards. Charging versus no charging. There's so many little intricate details. Is it even possible to get this done?
Well, those are great issues you just brought up, for sure. That's exactly what we're talking about here. When you get involved with this field, sometimes folks have no clue about some of the damage that they could cause. But I think in reality, in any organization, there's always the cream that rises to the top, the folks that want to do good for the entire organization and are willing to sit down and talk about these kinds of things. There's always going to be fly-by-night folks who aren't going to follow the guidelines, but hopefully they're just flashes in the pan and they're not going to harm folks as much as we want or don't want because of what their activity is. But I think the people that are interested in this and are discerning enough to realize that there are certain issues in the paranormal that need to be looked at and heeded would be able to get together, and probably not necessarily in in an actual, boots on the ground meeting, but there could be Skype things. There could be major conferences on the internet that we could get people involved with as well. Hopefully what it does, if they do get together, is kind of bring the rest of the folks up to a better level than what they are now or what they could be if they don't know some of the issues that they have to keep an eye on.
So if you were to set up a mandated team, how many members do you think there would be in order to write some sort of code of conduct? Because everybody comes at things differently.
Yes. And that is a great, a good example of this, of course, would be the United Nations and how they do things themselves. They would have sometimes subcommittees that would come together with a draft of something that would be proposed to the larger organization. The larger organization would take a look at it, come up with some suggestions on revisions or redactions or anything like that. And maybe the subcommittee goes back to work or they bring other folks in. So I can't imagine, it would be very unwieldy if you had any more than 20 people on something like that from the beginning. So you want to try to start with some kind of a organization or group that could do a good job of communicating with one another over a short period of time to come up with something that could be proposed to the larger group out there that are doing these things. And basically just by publishing it as a draft, kind of codification or suggestion of paranormal activity in investigations would definitely do a good service as far as bringing that issue to the rest of the folks out there that are not necessarily involved in the drafting of the documents.
So, from an outsider's perspective, because I know you're more a UFO guy, what would you like to see happen in the paranormal ghost side of things? What would you be in favor for? What would you be against?
Well, I think the whole idea of definitions initially is what you come up with a document like this. Anything that's codified, you come up with 1 or 2 pages, or at least the first part of the document, in defining certain issues and things that you're dealing with in this document. And so that would be the first step. You got to define what the heck we're talking about here in the area of ghosts and paranormal. And that would be a service in itself, just to define generally and sometimes specifically what we're dealing with in these things, so we can have some language to discuss. And then, of course, you get into the investigation activity, the pros and cons, when to investigate, when to call in different people with different skills. For instance, remote viewers, in UFO, in ghost hunting and those kinds of things can be very, very helpful because they're not just necessarily using the hard evidence and the gadgets. They're using their mental powers as well, and all that stuff has to be kind of defined and then put together in a document to allow folks to realize that this thing is a lot deeper than they thought when they got into the field, I'm sure.
The reason why I asked that question was because there are so many differences and nuances. You take the TAPS team, for instance, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, created by Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson from television show days. Okay, they do have a code of conduct. However, their code of conduct may not be in agreement with, say, what Eric Cooper's Forest Moon Paranormal is. I know when we've had members of TAPS on here, I was absolutely dumbfounded that even though the 2 ladies who were on my show were psychic, they don't allow psychics in TAPS, so whatever they were getting they weren't allowed to use that as evidence. And some TAPS groups don't even go as far as not even showing their client evidence. Their only job of TAPS is to go into a place to confirm whether or not it's haunted. There is no helping a client. So yes. I scratched my head on this for a long time, and I got a real bee in my bonnet about it. And trust me, it is a nice bonnet. It's tinfoil, right? But the whole point that I'm getting at is, how do you decide with a code of conduct what is the right way to do things and a wrong way?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, this is the same problem that any professional organization is confronted with. Let's say, for instance, the Southern lawyers back in the early 1900s, and the Northern lawyers trying to come up with some kind of a code for the American legal institution in general, the American Bar Association, for example. Those guys obviously went through some of these issues as well. There are certain ways that they do things down in a certain state and certain ways that people do things in another state. They're all after the same goal, of course, but they have to work things out as far as how they want to represent themselves if they want to be involved in the national organization of paranormal researchers or whatever you're going to call it. That's just a natural thing that happens when you get a bunch of folks together who are basically experts in their own field, in their own locations, geographically, etc. And they kind of butt heads periodically over certain issues. But they can be worked out. They always seem to be, eventually.
So in your opinion, then, where does science come into play? Because right now we actually have true scientists working on all of these fields, but then we have that fringe group of scientists or investigators who say they're claiming their work as scientific research, but the only thing they're doing is trying to push their own agenda and opinion as scientific fact.
Yes. Well, and that is just a standard problem with any kind of professional field itself. You've got certain people with certain agendas. Let's just take the American Medical Association for example. My gosh, that would be an incredible organization to be the head of or involved with in dealing with different people's medical professions scientifically, and how they're going to deal with that as a front, for the whole medical community itself. Yeah, it's got to be a challenge for sure. But there are science and there's pseudoscience, and then there's things that people would say are not science. But I believe that somehow, as we go further, of course, science continually changes and kind of opens itself up for some of these other fields that were in the past not considered scientific. So hopefully, this kind of a field in paranormal could encompass all of those, the hard knock scientific, strategists compared to sometimes the folks in the woo-woo out there as well.
My pet peeve term, woo-woo. What the heck? And you know what? I bring up a good point on that. At least it's a good point to me. What is woo-woo when we haven't proven anything in this field? Woo-woo, in my opinion, and I know that term is used frivolously, especially in the cryptid area, okay? But in my opinion, it is a term that says, I don't believe in it, so therefore it can't exist, and I'm going to make up some childish term to describe what other people are experiencing.
Yes. It seems to be a kind of a good old boy protection term. If you think you're in charge or in the mainstream of some kind of a field, you're going to brand anyone else who is not in that same vein as a woo-woo. This is too weird for me, so it's got to be kind of like put out on the fringes. It's like anything else. All of a sudden down the road, the woo-woo just becomes less woo, and people start looking at it with more of a discerning eye. And it's just one of those things that, it's always a political thing in any field like this, any profession. There's always, as it's forming and kind of defining itself, there are lots of folks that want to be involved or are involved, and they need to kind of get together somehow and determine, like we mentioned, the actual definitions of what we're dealing with. so that no one's marginalized, when they actually come up with unique ideas and things that might turn out later on to be old ideas and facts.
No, I get that, but do you think that a lot of people hide behind that term just because they can't wrap their whole mind around the possibility that, let's say, Bigfoot being a shapeshifter? A lot of people don't believe that, or it's interdimensional. And for people who do, such as myself, we are considered dealing in woo-woo. Yet it hasn't been disproven, which is science.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, difficult to prove a negative. And so that's what they try to put on you, the standard that you should prove a negative. And, of course, if you don't, they call you woo-woo. But these are kind of folks that, and a lot of people will say, well, you know what, some of these scientific minds out there are not going to change their mind ever. They're not going to try to open their minds at all to this new kind of things that are coming along, facts and theories, because a lot of them survive off of their grants and their corporate backers and those kinds of things for a living. So they're kind of protecting themselves in that regard. And of course, the folks that are woo-woo out there probably don't depend on those monetary backers to begin with. So they're kind of free to do whatever they like.
Mike, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because we got to hop out for our first commercial break of the night. The paranormal lawyer, Michael W. Hall, is our guest. His latest project, the UFOiTeam down in Washington State. You can find them on Facebook. I highly suggest you do. We're going to get more into the law side of the paranormal, more into UFOs, and whatever else kind of comes our way because, well, we're good that way. Don't forget, your questions coming up as well. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. We'll be back right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at UFOseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from Euphoria Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Corinne DeWinter is going to be with us. We're going to talk all things intuitive. We're going to talk dimensions, a higher self, and everything in between. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Iatrophobia. Iatrophobia is your password. Make sure you use a password wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn and download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. You can also read The Encounter online or check out great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and more. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking with paranormal lawyer extraordinaire Michael W. Hall is with us. He is also part of the UFOiTeam out of Washington State. We're talking everything to do with law, the idea of a code of conduct in these fields of research. Michael, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. I'm here.
Excellent to have you, my friend. Excellent to have you. And I'm watching your live feed right now as we speak on the Facebook page UFOiTeam, because you got Skype going as well. It's kind of funny to actually watch this, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, from your perspective, this is pretty awesome. From my perspective, I'm having a great time. We've got some folks out here from all over the place that are UFOiTeam members and or supporters and or sat phone consultants as well. So I'm having fun.
Well, good. And that is the main thing about this, and we want to say hi to everybody at the UFOiTeam who is listening in, hopefully for the first time and maybe not the last. So thank you for checking out what we're doing with Mike tonight. Right before the break, Mike, we were talking about codes of conduct inside the paranormal field, whether it's ghost investigations, cryptid investigations, or in the field of ufology. And we were talking about whether or not it's gone too far at this point to even try and get some sort of, paranormal unity, if we can use that term ever so loosely, in regards to it. We see so many people asking for paranormal unity, yearning for paranormal unity. Is it something, Mike, that is just too much of a pipe dream at this point?
It's obviously a major challenge. There are folks out there that are doing their own thing. They would probably blanch at the idea of having to join an organization or follow certain guidelines in what they're doing. But it's always one of those things that in any professional or paraprofessional organization, the time comes along where you've got enough people involved that you need to put together some thoughts in this regard, even if they're only advisory thoughts or advisory codifications in this area of the paranormal. This is something that lawyers are used to doing, coming into a field and trying to not standardize, but trying to raise the conduct potentially of everybody that does these things. And the folks that aren't going to be involved or interested in this whole thing will probably just see something that they are going to aspire to or say they always do anyway. So it couldn't hurt. I think it's a good idea.
Once again, if you were to set this up, what would be, let's say, and I'm putting you on the spot here, what would be the top 3 areas of focus for any sort of code of conduct, whether it's cryptids, UFOs, or ghosts?
Well, okay. The number one we mentioned first would be the definitions. If we can come up with not a codified list of definitions, but some kind of something that everyone could at least agree on, or close enough to defining the terms that we're dealing with. That's number one. That's got to happen right from the beginning of any kind of a organizational code at all. And then, of course, there is the ethical issues of investigating these various fields and how you're going to deal with other people and witnesses, experiencers, those kinds of issues. There's always been the issue of whether someone should or should not be regressed hypnotically to try to enhance their memories in ufology or any kind of cryptid sightings. Even those issues there could be set down as a suggested conduct on how to deal with those issues, because it may or may not be a good thing for someone to be regressed hypnotically and remember things they may not want to remember even. Of course, those are something that we have to deal with. But so that's number two. Number two is coming up with the code of conduct or ethics involved in the investigations of these kinds of things. And of course, I suppose if I had to come up with a third issue, I would think there would have to be how we are going to represent, believe it or not, the interests of our subjects, the interests of either aliens that are involved with UFOs or ghosts that are actually in reality around us all the time, the cryptids, the Bigfoots, and those kinds of things. Their best interests also need to be put into the mix on this whole thing, and come up with some suggestions and codes of how to deal with them from their perspective as well. So those are, off the top of my head, just three of the issues I think we should talk about.
You mentioned something very interesting in number 2 with ethical investigation. That has been probably paramount in the way paranormal teams, cryptid teams, and UFO teams have taken so much criticism, not only by their compatriots in the field, but by the mainstream as well. How would you go about bringing together ethical investigation when there's so many different ethical questions regarding the techniques that are used?
Yes, that is the big question right there. Matter of fact, I always try to bring up the idea when I'm in this discussion with folks. You remember the movie Fire in the Sky regarding Travis Walton's abduction and his missing time and all of that. When he was brought back, and this is the reality, by the way, not just the movie, but because I know Travis and I've been able to talk with him about these things. When he was brought back immediately, he was totally overwhelmed with the media and the attention that he got. And of course, there was one organization that came and got a hold of him first and wanted to kind of have the exclusive of his interview. Come to find out, that organization was probably after an agenda of their own and not really Travis's best well-being. And so his brother, Dwayne, really kind of saved him from that whole scenario by secreted him away for a few days just so he can get his head back on his shoulders. And then, of course, other people got involved and were able to kind of relate to Travis and his family better, maybe than the first organization that came along. So there's always different approaches and different agendas involved with various investigators or investigation teams in any of these fields. So that's the big question, is how we can come up with a code of conduct or some kind of suggested guidelines on how they're going to be dealing with those folks. And if we can publicize these suggested guidelines generally to the public, then they will know what to expect, hopefully, from folks who come up and say they have this expertise in this field, and they can maybe provide a service for them as an investigative unit. But if they don't know what the issues are and or the standards that could be put forward in this kind of thing, they wouldn't know. But I think publicizing the idea that there are certain standards to the general public would be helpful as well.
Do you see that starting on the grassroots, or does there have to be some of these big-name people come out and take this, whether it's Travis Walton, whether it's someone like Zach Bagans or Jason Hawes or someone along those lines that people can recognize from their television days?
Yes. Well, all those people you mentioned, of course, are names in the field, and they're very busy folks in the field as well. They're doing their things, they're speaking, they're traveling, and all that kind of stuff. What I would do, right from the bottom, is I would get a core group of folks together, maybe not more than 10 or 12, who would be interested in coming up with this kind of an idea and coming up with draft terms, draft suggestions for this kind of a conduct and code. And then what you do is you would show it to some of the folks with the names that are involved in these fields and see if they would be interested in getting involved or lending their name to this whole idea of trying to not standardize the field, but kind of bring the field up as far as professionalism goes. Because those folks are so busy, they're not going to be able to make the meetings and the Skype conferences and those kinds of things that will need to be done to actually get something on paper. So I think that would be a good strategy. You get a core group of folks, which would be probably geographically dispersed throughout the country, that would be interested in this field, and not just the country, but worldwide, and come up with maybe some draft terms that would be good to show some of the other folks in the field who have a little bit more clout and see if they'd be able to jump on board.
Are you surprised there hasn't been many lawsuits filed across the United States or even Canada in regards to the way some people investigate? Because we hear of buildings or areas, museums, graveyards that have been shut down to paranormal investigation because of people coming in there to investigate but treating the place with a high regard of disrespect, and they no longer conduct paranormal investigations. In fact, just a couple hours south of me, there is an asylum that's been closed down for a number of years that will not allow paranormal investigation in there because a television program came in and really did some damage in there. And we hear it. Are you surprised that the paranormal hasn't hit the law courts yet regarding the way people are investigating?
The only way I think that a court system would get involved in those kinds of investigations would be if you're talking trespass and those kinds of issues of damage of property, those kinds of things, because that can be dealt with within the system as it is. But when you're talking about someone who might want to bring a cause of action against an investigative group because they didn't get rid of the ghost, for instance, or they made the ghost really rabid and hostile to them after they left, those kinds of issues are the court is not prepared at this point to address. The proof would be difficult, of course. Of course, the only thing that you could get close to on something like that would be intentional infliction of emotional distress, which is like a tort action. It's not like assault or anything like that, but it would be something similar to the idea of putting someone under intentional stress. But then again, you'd have to determine and prove the damages that a person would be bringing with them as well. So I'm not surprised that this has not happened very often in the paranormal field, but I think in the past, the suggestion or the example you brought up about the asylum not allowing folks into their premises any longer because of whatever happened there before, that's something that could happen very often, that people have own private property and they don't want to allow folks in there, not only just because there could be damage done to the property, but perhaps the investigation or the production that is coming out of an investigation treats them in an ill light, for instance, or brings them to a public scrutiny that they didn't want to have to begin with. So those kinds of issues the court could deal with. The other paranormal issues of damage and intentional infliction of emotional distress would be harder to prove.
Well, this leads to a couple of questions from our audience members in the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook. Mike is asking, have you ever worked a paranormal case in court?
Oh, no. I have not ever worked a paranormal case in court. That's why I was very interested in the Bigfoot case that they're bringing up there in BC. That would be very interesting for me to follow, to see how that works up there. If indeed they're successful, then I'm jumping on board. I'm thinking, well, that's now a new legal field that might be worthy of some more attention down here in the States for sure. But no, I can't remember if there was anything that would have been paranormal other than I've practiced family law for over 30 years, divorces and child custody and those kinds of issues. And, of course, people are always throwing around allegations during that process of trying to split up their assets and their debts and those kinds of things. I can't really say if I've had someone claim that the other person was a bad person because they were into ufology or big feet or whatever.
Well, this leads to Char's question. Are there any legal protections from poor investigators who bring more evil into someone's home? And if so, how would you prove it?
Exactly. That is the crux of the matter there. If there was some kind of, here's the standard I would go for that could be proved in court, or at least have testimony from an expert witness in court, because expert witnesses carry a lot of weight. So if you had, for instance, a psychiatrist, your PhD or master's level counselor who was always dealing with you for a period of time before an event like this happened, and then all of a sudden something happened that was drastically different in your case, in your personal life, it could be, for instance, that would be something that might be able to survive a tort claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress. That would be the only thing I could think of, because you could actually bring in, and for instance, let's just go back to divorce cases. In divorce cases, a lot of times there will be a motion for one or both parties to take a psychological evaluation to figure out who is in the best position to be able to maybe have custody of the children or those kinds of things. The weight of those independent physicians or PhD counselors and or folks that are involved in dealing with people's well-being, even a guardian ad litem, for instance, if it's appointed by the court as an independent investigator to look into the best interests of the children, those kinds of things are heavily weighted by the court. The court doesn't have a lot of time to deal in these issues during the day. You've got to realize a court commissioner, a judge who is sitting on a bench from 8:30 in the morning till like 5:30 in the evening, has a stack of files on his clerk's desk in front of him that is maybe 5 feet tall, maybe a couple stacks, less than that. And they've got to go through all of those files in the day. If they don't, they're going to have a bigger stack tomorrow. So you might have 5-10 minutes to argue your case on a motion like this initially. Now, if you go to trial as something else, then you've got, a couple days to lay out your case. But, of course, going to trial is expensive and costs some money as well, or time as well. But if you could get in expert witnesses involved in a pattern of activity, and the pattern of activity escalates because of the activity of some poor investigation, that might be a claim right there.
I'm going to get to Sonny's question here in a moment, but I do want to ask you in regards to extraterrestrials. There's a lot of people who have claimed experiences, whether it's benevolent or malevolent, when it comes to their own personal experiences with ETs. Now, is a court case possible, or are you able to sue, let's say, the government, if it comes out through the disclosure process that the government in the United States or Canada, wherever it may be, but since you're a lawyer in the United States, let's stick there, if they knew that these abductions were happening?
Of course, I have to give my initial caveat off the top is I can only practice law in the state of Washington. That's where my license is. But, of course, this is a really great place to practice law if you're a paranormal lawyer. So I enjoy it. But the whole idea of bringing a case against the federal government or any kind of a state government or any kind of entity that is potentially colluding or hiding information in this regard, that would be the ultimate coup if you could bring something like that out. The whole idea of potentially the MyLab abductions, for instance, that would be one of the things that, one of the areas you might be able to bear fruit on if indeed you could prove some of these things that are going on through whistleblowers or whatever, that they're allowing them to happen and or managing them themselves for some reason. So these kinds of issues are, of course, what the entire field of ufology and or cryptology or any of these issues are dealing with. How do you prove something that is being totally discounted and hidden from the general public to begin with? So that would be an awesome.
But let's say, Mike, that the government comes out and says they knew when disclosure happens. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of jaw dropping, especially in the mainstream media. And if they come out, if that piece of paper comes out that says the U.S. government knows about abductions but has done nothing about it, are you telling me that there is no legal right, even let's stay in your own state, in the state of Washington, for people to go after the government for knowing and not doing anything about protecting their rights?
Yeah, that's exactly the issue that they're afraid of course. The whole idea of disclosure is long overdue, of course, but that's the reason why they are opting for soft disclosure at this point in trickling out information through folks like Tom DeLonge, et cetera, and those kinds of issues, Stephen Greer, regarding free energy and or alternatives to, fossil fuels, those kinds of issues. If they came out, like you said, just right away and said, well, guess what? We have known these things have been going on for decades, and we really weren't able and are in a position to do anything about it, that would be a massive lawsuit in itself, class action, whatever you want to call it. And actually, that's one reason why I came up with this idea of what I call the Disclosure Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, believe it or not. Because I think you hit the nail right on the head, Dave, with whenever this disclosure is going to happen, even if it trickles out, at one point, there's going to be a whole lot of folks in different parts of society is going to go, wait a minute, are you telling me that we could have had this decades ago and my father probably died of cancer and might not have had to because we didn't disperse some of this information, for instance? When the folks in South Africa or the American Indians, the indigenous folks here in the States, at one point they actually came up with reconciliation commissions for those issues because of the wrongs that were made on folks over the years. Ufology is a great example. And at one point, there's going to have to be some discussion about what really the truth was. And how are we going to reconcile that with the damage that it has done And I think it's got to be something that's got to be put together soon rather than later, because these disclosures are trickling out, the whistleblowers are showing up, and we need to get people involved in actually figuring out how we're going to deal with this massive backlash that's looming down the road here when people really find out what's going on.
Literally, that could be billions of dollars in lawsuits. Billions paid out.
And you know, in the past, what they've done with those kinds of issues is that Congress has gotten together and given the pharmaceutical industry, protection in that regard. That's happened in many times in our past. I don't know that the disclosure of this size would be able to stand that kind of protection, because a lot of folks are going to be very, very disappointed. Now, the only other issue that could stem that tide of disgust and amazement about what has been happening in the past would be, and I'm sure this is in the plan, to come up with excuses why this had to happen. That's going to bring a whole new issue to the area of ufology and the reality of potential extraterrestrial presence on Earth. In reality, if Tom DeLong is correct, there's some major problems with the ETs being here, and we need to protect ourselves from them. And of course, then if Mr. Greer, Dr. Greer is correct, we don't have anything to worry about. And of course, they could have taken us out many times in the past, and they haven't done that yet, so that lends us to believe that there's only positive things that are coming down the road. But again, even if, let's just take the positive twist to this. If there's a positive spin on this entire extraterrestrial presence on Earth, just the fact that it's been covered up for so long is going to make a whole lot of folks very upset of why it wasn't disclosed earlier, why their loved ones weren't able to take advantage of the technological advances that were available even back in the 40s or whenever they're going to claim that they retrieved some of this technology. So I'm looking for a way to put this whole thing together where we can deal with this issue. I have actually in my past been the vice president of the Puget Sound Christian College out here in the state of Washington. So I have a religious perspective to bring to the table as well, but I also have the analytical lawyer mind and the paranormal issues that I've been involved with my whole life. So I think that there's got to be some equal or center ground where people can come together with their grievances, of course, and get some reconciliation to happen.
See, I look at it as this. Any form of disclosure could be very dangerous. Now, a lot of people will say there's soft disclosure out there. A lot of people will say that there is a need for full-on disclosure. We need to know everything the government is hiding. But literally, do you think, like I do, that this full-on disclosure, if everything was released, that it could bring down literally not only a government but a society as well, because it has financial implications, it has health regulatory implications, it has governmental implications, defense implications, religious implications. It could bring down society as we know it.
Yes, exactly. And that's the massive conundrum that we're going to face. People are not discussing it at this point because everybody wants to, or a lot of folks want to deny the whole issue is ever going to happen. But someone has got to start that discussion, because you're right, Dave. You hear the folks out there to say, well, we can handle it. The young people aren't going to have a problem with this. The baby boomers, okay, they'll get over it, that kind of thing. But in reality, this is going to be a massive hit to the psyche of human beings on the planet, not just in our countries, around the world. This is going to be an interesting way. It's almost going to be this forced consciousness raising that will have to happen if any kind of disclosure will be made. And I think there's probably a reason, Dave, why you and I are placed on this planet at this interesting time, because we've got work to do, that's for sure.
This leads to Sonny's question. How do you think it would go in court if intelligent alien visitors were here? How would we treat them? I apologize, Sonny. I absolutely just butchered your question here. Let me rephrase it here. How do you think, Michael, that the intelligent alien visitors would be handled? Do they have rights at all?
Yes, in our court system, that would be an awesome task as well. When, for instance, if the disclosure came out that these people, extraterrestrial organizations and individuals are actually alive and on the planet, how are we going to treat them? Are they, for instance, covered by the Constitution? Is our Constitution, the Founding Fathers, have they drafted a document that would be large enough to accumulate and deal with that kind of issue of extraterrestrial presence that they had no clue about in the past? And how would we treat them as entities in a courtroom? Of course, it might be that they tell us how to treat them in the courtroom, and or how to deal with the galactic laws that are out there that we are probably at this very moment, not doing well in following, with some of our environmental issues and technology that's probably sending ripples out into at least our corner of the galaxy anyway. So I am looking forward to that, because there are not a whole lot of lawyers that are even thinking in that area. I like Sonny's question because it really kind of puts the rubber to the road on what the heck we're going to do with, for instance, our legal system. How is it going to be able to withstand this whole consciousness raising itself?
And this leads to Michael's question in the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook. Has anyone that you know of filed against the United States government for withholding evidences about UFOs?
Well, yes. The famous UFO lawyer, my hero. This is, his name is escaping me right now, but this was the Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. Their lawyer was the very first person to, they've been, did some requests for FOIA documents and those kinds of things, and they were shut down. And they actually took that to court and actually won against the government for disclosure of certain documents that they say they didn't have. And of course, that's when some of the initial unclassified documentation on UFOs was actually released, at least in the United States. That was probably, I would say, 15 years ago, where they actually came up and won some cases. They weren't, they were procedural cases, of course. That the government was holding documents that they actually had and they said they didn't have. So they made them almost prove that they didn't have them. And of course, that's when certain things kind of leaked out at that point too as well.
Craig is asking, do your own intuitive abilities make you a better lawyer?
Wow, I got a great story on that question. Thank you for asking it. My, the first week in law school is just an awesome experience. Matter of fact, at one point I checked myself in the hospital for 3 days thinking I'm having a heart attack. That's how difficult It is. The first class that they give you is constitutional law, where they try to scare the heck out of you and try to get you to get out of this law school, because they want folks who are going to stick with it for the long haul. So on the first day of school, one of my law professors did one of those psychological evaluations for everybody, just kind of anonymously, and we all put ourselves into 4 different quadrants on the chalkboard of what kind of what our personalities were like. You know, there's the general analytical person. There's the folks that have some intuitive ability, and there's kind of like right brain, left brain folks. And I remember looking at the final results. They were anonymous, so no one knew who they were in the class. But my gosh, everybody was kind of clustered around the analytical brain kind of person. And I'm sitting over here in this one quadrant with like maybe 2 or 3 people, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong place. I shouldn't be going to law school. The only thing that saved me and kept me in class was that my professor, my favorite professor that was putting on this whole kind of scenario on the board, he actually pointed himself out on the board and says, well, I'm in this other quadrant over here, which is kind of not really analytical, more intuitive. So I think the question is very, very timely. I think it helps me quite a bit. Matter of fact, when I am cross-examining someone on the stand, you know, the train of thought that comes to you while you're doing this sometimes is very helpful if you're intuitive. Otherwise, you just give the questions right off the bat like you're deposing someone. They're all written down ahead of time. You're just going through the motions. But if you can find that intuitive cue that you get from someone who's talking to you, all of a sudden the floodgates open up and the real truth comes out if you can discern, you know, how to do it. And I really appreciate the question, because I hopefully am able to do that.
Moving over towards ufology, as we've kind of got into the whole disclosure program, because of the rich history in Washington State regarding UFOs, do you think Washington State is a state that is more open-minded to the subjects at hand?
Oh, yes. I mean, of course, you always hear these different things about our state being very progressive. You know, we talk about the woo-woo factor. I mean, this is it in the Pacific Northwest, up in this area. People seem to kind of, I don't know, down in California, they've got what they call the Golden Triangle down there, where a lot of motivated individuals show up in a certain area geographically. I think over the years, a lot of those Californians have moved up to Washington State and seem to be, you know, kind of getting together out here in this area, because we are, you talk to anybody in the street, at the local grocery store, no one really kind of shuts you down any longer when you're talking about it. Matter of fact, sometimes I'll wear my little vest, my safari vest, and I've got a little Bigfoot patch on there, and people go, oh, and they'll come up to me all the time and talk about, you know, their sighting of a Bigfoot or a UFO, just because they see someone that's interested in it. I don't see the negativity as much in this area any longer.
Well, that leads to the UFOiTeam. Explain what the UFOiTeam is, your new project.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I am excited for this because, you know, I remember watching over the last few years the episodes of Finding Bigfoot. And, you know, a lot of people will have some maybe issues with that show, but I really enjoy the idea that Matt Moneymaker, the guy basically who started the Bigfoot organization nationwide, could actually pitch to a production company the fact that we're going to go out with investigators who have some cred behind them, and they're going to go out and look for Bigfoot. And, of course, the issue is how many times you're going to be able to find Bigfoot. And, of course, the answer is, well, we're probably not going to find Bigfoot, but we're going to have some interesting facts and disclosures along the way as we attempt to find Bigfoot. So I thought that was quite an amazing opportunity for someone to be able to do that show. And of course, that show was one of the most popular shows, out there for years. Everybody was watching the show. And so I thought, and I've been in ufology for many, many years, and I've accumulated a whole lot of friends, professional and otherwise, who are into this field. So I thought it was about time we bring everybody together and create a reality television show called the UFOiTeam, where we actually go out and investigate sighting reports. We're having actual town meetings in small communities, and we're having people come out and testify, by the way, to their sightings. So this is not necessarily like a Finding Bigfoot where people just show up and kind of tell their stories. We are actually having a local, what we call disclosure commission, which is going to comprise of local maybe politicians, law enforcement, clergy, combined with the actual UFOiTeam investigators who are experienced field investigators. And we're going to form a panel and have the experiencers testify under oath, by the way, about their experiences. And then, of course, what we do is follow up on those experiences, 2, 3, 4 of them in an episode, and get an in-depth about their stories and their sightings and any proof that they can come up with. It's very fun and exciting. And what we do too also is instead of creating CGI renditions of what's going on, we actually have a forensic sketch artist. His name is Snowy Benson, and this guy is awesome. He'll come out and listen to the testimony and follow us into the field, and he will do sketch art of the actual things that people are telling him, and they're just amazing. So we are actually getting firsthand information and putting it on paper so that other people can confirm whether this is what they saw or not. And of course, every night we do have what we call the Sky Watch in the local community. We'll sit around the old campfire and we'll talk about today's different disclosures that we've come across in the UFO sightings. But we have the technical gear like you wouldn't believe. We've got a guy named Lee Strauss, by the way, I'm sorry, that has night vision video. He's got all sorts of infrared, kind of issues that we can go up there with binoculars, and telescopes, and we capture the anomalous aerial activity that happens right there in these communities. Of course, we've never been really shut out yet. We always come up with some kind of interesting technology that's going on up in the skies that is fantastic. And it kind of goes along with our actual experiencers reports as well. We're really excited about how this thing is going to take off, because there's not going to be a problem of us not finding Bigfoot. We're going to have plenty of UFOs to be able to show and share and talk about.
The purpose of setting up a group, because everybody will say, what are you doing differently that other groups around North America or the world haven't done? Right. Well, we're not out there to put ourselves above and beyond anybody else. We want to be a complement, of course, to what's going on out there. I think what the real issue is that we need to get this whole idea out to the public more. And if we can come across with a well put together, produced, reality television show that people will like to watch and be informed as well, I think that's what we're looking for. Of course, MUFON did this with their Hangar 1 series as well. They took a lot of their sighting reports and they put them into kind of recreation format and kind of have gone through this kind of thing in that regard. But we, by the way, are using Peter Davenport's National UFO Reporting Center database to come up with our leads on some of these sighting reports. And, of course, Peter, for the last 22 years, has been just dogged in getting all the information that he possibly can, posting it on his website, and allowing the public to know exactly what's going on. So we actually got Peter's... we kind of put him in a class of what the Charlie's Angels
guy used to do over the little speaker. We never see Peter Davenport, but he's always in touch with us via the sat phone. And he can call in at any time and direct us in a certain area that we need to go from his undisclosed bunker deep within the bowels of an abandoned Nike missile site. That's where he actually has moved the National UFO Reporting Center. And we're having fun because Peter will actually keep us on track and point out certain kind of areas that we need to double check and or check out for him as the reports come in live over the reporting center.
So when you have all of this different setup that a lot of people are doing, what are you looking for? Are you looking for proof or are you looking for evidence? Because there is a very big distinction between the two.
Right. Well, I tell you what, the evidence does become proof at one point. And that's what we're trying to point out, because people will have certain maybe trace evidence reports. They will have various radar returns. For instance, a good friend of ours, Bill Puckett, is an expert in actually deciphering radar returns as they relate to UFO sightings. And when you come up with evidence like that, sometimes now it gets to the level of proof that there are things that are unidentified aerial phenomena that are happening above our skies all over the place that people can't ignore any longer. We actually have quite a group of what we call our sat phone consultants, satellite phone network consultants that have been helping us come up with what we call proof from some of these sighting reports. We've got, of course, Peter Davenport. He helps us out many times. He's got some advanced degrees himself, but we've got Dr. Richard Haynes involved in this thing. He's NASA retired, and he was the gentleman who was involved with what they call the human factors scientific pursuit of astronauts. I mean, when you're going to put a human being into a tin can and send them up into space, you want to know how that person is going to react over the long haul. And of course, he relates that to the whole issue of what he calls unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP as well. And we've got Dr. Marilyn Childs as well, who is actually a PhD in what they call archaeoastronomy. So she has quite an extensive background in the whole idea of what aerial phenomena should be and what they are, and of course it goes back to ancient times as well. So we've got a bunch of folks on the line that kind of help us maybe move these evidence bits and pieces that we get into the area of proof, and then that's what we need to do, is show people what we've got.
So when you gather your evidence, what do you do with your evidence? Because this is the big concern for a lot of groups out there, Michael, on what they do with their evidence. If you take the TAPS teams, they don't do much with their evidence. You know, they're not comparing it. They're not trying to solve the ultimate mystery. What are you doing with your evidence?
Well, that's exactly what we need to avoid, is anyone thinking that we're gathering evidence and keeping it to ourselves. Matter of fact, I go back to a story about 10, 15 years ago when I was representing the National UFO Reporting Center against a move by NIDS, Robert Bigelow's group. And I don't have any bad things to say about NIDS, but I do need to relate this story, is that at one point NIDS bought up all the FAA tower manuals and was able to get manuals reissued with the whole idea that if you saw a UFO and you called your local FAA tower at the airport or whatever, they would send these sighting reports to NIDS and not to the National UFO Reporting Center, who had always been into flight manuals and the FAA tower manuals for people to call. But what happened is that those reports to NIDS didn't come out to the public. It was tough because they were gathering information and wanting to keep it proprietary. So we actually went to a legal war on that one on Peter's behalf, and pointed out to the Air Force, who was in charge of this area of the law, that this was an unconstitutional, issue that they were trying to deal with, taking public information and money, and then funneling things to a private organization who was not allowing these reports to come out in the open. So that's one thing that we are attempting to do, and Peter Davenport has always done, is to make everything public. Matter of fact, our goal is to, whenever we investigate an area or get into the details of a sighting report, we want that not only to go back to the National UFO Reporting Center website so everyone could check it out, but we want to publicize it in some kind of a format like this reality television show that people will watch and be informed with, because I think a lot of people don't realize there are things going on over their heads all the time that they have no clue about.
Where can people find information on the UFOiTeam right now?
Right now, what they could do is just go to our Facebook page. What we're doing is posting some footage up there. We're posting our various investigations up there, because what we don't want to do, and I'll tell you why we're only doing it on Facebook at this point. We don't want to get these this information and sometimes our edited versions of the investigations too much publicity at this point, because what we're trying to do is get this picked up as a pilot episode for an actual series. And of course, any producer out there doesn't want us to saturate the market and or kind of show the format of what we're doing at this point. But Facebook would be the best place to go, and all they do is punch in UFOiTeam, and iTeam is lower, and they'll find us there.
All right, Mike, I'm going to get you to hold on. We are through 2 hours with our guest tonight, the paranormal lawyer, Michael W. Hall from UFOiTeam. That's a lowercase I and then T-A-A-M. T-E-A-M. Find it on Facebook. Michael Hall is going to join us for one more hour tonight. We're going to continue on with everything paranormal and cryptid, maybe get into a little bit of Bigfoot as well. We'll be back with more Space Out Radio in hour number 3 right after this.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's strange days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, we get into intuition, dimensions, self-help, and so much more. Corrine DeWinter from PurplePlates.com will be our guest. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at SpacedOutRadio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well at the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Iatrophobia. Iatrophobia is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You could join us for live chat on Facebook in the SOR Space Travelers group as well. We're also on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can rock out to some Bumblefoot. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. You can also read The Encounter online or watch videos from Contact TV and UFO Seekers and so much more. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we talk with the man who is called the Paranormal Lawyer. Michael W. Hall is our guest tonight. His group, UFOiTeam, is setting up UFO, cryptid, and ghostly watches in Washington State. Michael, welcome back.
I'm here, Dave.
Do you believe there is a correlation between ghosts, cryptids like Sasquatch, and UFOs?
You know, I think there probably is. When we find out what's really going on all around us, some kind of correlation between all of them. You know, there might not be a mistake that we've got cryptid activity with UFO activity at the same place, same times. There might even be a reason why ghosts hang around a certain geographical area as well. There might be something to do with the vortexes that are always around us but undiscovered, and make it easier, or make the veil thinner, let's put it that way. I think there's probably a correlation to all this stuff when we get right down to it.
So when you say there could be a correlation in between the three groups, personally, what do you think that is?
Well, personally, I'm thinking, and I have heard these reports over the years. Like I said, I've been a ufologist for most of my life, but heavy duty within the last 25 years, and listening to different reports from the database of Peter Davenport and the National UFO Reporting Center, where people are actually claiming that they are seeing Bigfeet, Sasquatches, in the same general area of UFO landings, for instance. In my neck of the woods down here in Bothell, Washington, believe it or not, which is a pretty large city, but there's lots of greenery and forested areas here in Snohomish County. I remember a report where a gentleman was saying that he saw a UFO land and was hiding in the bushes because of it, and then saw, for some reason, entities come out of the UFO, small, grayish kind of entities, and then he sees a Bigfoot come out of the UFO. Now, that's just one sighting and one report, but with the correlation of lots of things like that happening in the same general area, as far as sighting reports go, you always wonder what's going on there. The whole idea of tying it all into apparitions and ghosts and those kinds of things, it seems to me that there are certain areas that are fascinating to study. For instance, the hitchhiker that always shows up on a certain area of a lonely road, and typically will, not typically, but sometimes actually manifest themselves in the vehicle next to the person who either did stop or didn't stop to pick them up. So you wonder if those areas that happen are certain areas that they happen in that area for a reason. I don't know why, but when you go in deeper and find out that there are other sighting reports of various other phenomena in the same general area, you wonder why it happens in that way, and maybe not in all areas equally.
Mm-hmm. The reason why I ask is, when it comes to Sasquatch, there are so many different aspects of what this creature is. We have the scientific community who believes it is an ape-like creature, maybe Gigantopithecus, that has been roaming North America since we were all one continent, Pangea. We have the First Nations and American Indians who believe that this is a creature that has some sort of supernatural ability. Some believe shape-shifting, some believe it's interdimensional, and that's the reason why we've never found a body. And then there's people like Kawani Lapsaritis in Washington State who believe that they're their own people and their own tribe, and they need to be treated like people. Where's your stand on this?
Well, as a lawyer, of course, I have to keep my options open for proof and evidence. And a lot of the proof that is being proffered, of course, is firsthand testimony, secondhand hearsay, and those kinds of things. So I try to keep an open mind and a skeptical mind in this regard. But I think in reality, my experience has told me over the years that these things are real, and they need to be looked into with a scientific scrutiny that has not been brought to the field before. I remember when I was in college at Washington State University, I was in the film and radio department there, got my degree in that, on my BA anyway. There was a professor there by the name of Grover Krantz. He was, of course, well before Professor Meldrum, Jeff Meldrum, who is doing a heck of a job right now as well in this cryptid field. But I remember back then in the 70s, Professor Krantz was showing the actual evidence of Bigfoot plaster casts and hair samples well before the DNA capability was available. So back then, in those days, I was really piqued with my interest in not only UFOs, but in the whole cryptid area as well with Bigfoot. And he was telling us back then that these things were coming from our neck of the woods, whether Eastern Washington or the Pacific Northwest or whatever. So that was an eye-opener for me.
There's a question from Milo here, just off topic, and I just want to get to it, and I can answer this one because I just got some great information on this. Milo is asking, do you know of any UFO crashes here in Canada where the American sees the site, Canada steps aside? I don't know of any crashes, Milo, but it's interesting you asked that question. And Michael, I'm curious to get your opinion on this. I had a conversation with an RCMP officer here locally in my town, and just out of the blue I asked him, what is the RCMP protocol when it comes to UFOs? And his response back to me was, are we talking in the air or on land? And I said, well, let's start off in the air. And he says, okay. He goes, if somebody calls 911 on a UFO call, the local dispatch center will send out RCMP officers to get a statement. In the meantime, the office calls RCMP headquarters. I'm not sure if that's in British Columbia or the head office in Ottawa, Ontario, our nation's capital, who then forwards the report to NORAD, which I find very, very interesting. And then NORAD decides whether or not to send up CF-18s from the Canadian Armed Forces to see if they can intercept the craft.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, what if it's on the ground? He says, I don't know. I said, well, how do you have a protocol from it being in the air comparatively to being on the ground? He goes, I would assume that if you called us, we would come investigate whether or not, the craft is there. If the craft is there, he goes, I'm assuming the military would automatically be called, but that would be automatically brought up by head office. So it made me wonder, and I talked to Eric Cooper about this, and I talked to a few others about this, in regards to this scenario, if we could call it that, that it's really the United States controlling, through NORAD, all Canadian UFO sightings reported to the RCMP.
Yeah, that is fascinating. What an interesting response that he gave you there. The fact that he said that these things are forwarded to NORAD shows you that this web of detection capability is probably not just necessarily countrywide and or North American wide. It's larger than that. I'm sure that NORAD has its own offices elsewhere in the world. There's got to be a huge net, probably satellite based, of any kind of thing. Well, matter of fact, Tom DeLong was mentioning this in his recent press conference, where he had the person who was in charge of incursions in our airspace that has been doing this for 10 years, assessing the threat from outer space. And he actually mentioned that. But here's the interesting response that RCMP officer gave you. He knew what the protocol was for aerial phenomena. He didn't know what the protocol was for crashed saucers or crashed craft. Now that lends credence to the fact that, of course, we've all heard that if something like this ever hit the ground, there would be a Special Forces unit, Delta Force, whatever you want to call them, on the scene immediately. And, of course, Stevensville, different places around the country have kind of shown that in the testimony that people have come up with crash reports, is that almost immediately they know that these things are in the air, actually coming down, I believe, because of the NORAD net that they've got there. And, of course, by the time it hits the ground, they've got people notified wherever it happens that they can jump on it immediately, put a lid on it, cordon off the area. But the fact that the RCMP didn't know that's interesting. It shows you that it's way up the chain of command on the security and level of what people know and what they don't know.
I guess the more interesting tie to me was that the United States really has, in North America, well, Canada and the U.S., locked down what is said and what can and cannot be said when it comes to UFOs. I didn't realize up until that point that Canada was that tied in the field of ufology reports to the United States. I thought they would be completely two different entities.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to say that's what I've heard as well, is that the U.S. and probably the deep state in our countries kind of work together and basically kind of coordinate this whole area in one location. Who knows where it is, Cheyenne Mountain or whatever, and or you wonder if the President of the United States is even informed with some of these things, and whether he has or she has a need to know, even in this field, is amazing. So, and I believe, too, is another example of that, where the United States is totally involved in the Virginia, I believe they call it, crash retrieval case, where they had actually aliens, supposedly, that they were able to capture into this crash. That was even coordinated by the United States. I mean, supposedly they use boots on the ground wherever they're at, but they're told what to do, and they're backed up by special forces that can get there within minutes, I understand. And, of course, if the secret space program is correct, they can get anywhere on the planet in minutes, let alone Mars and the moon. So it's weird to think that this hub of coordination would be in one place, but if it is, I would believe it's probably right here in the United States.
So getting back to Bigfoot, because I kind of interrupted our Bigfoot talk there. Washington State has numerous investigators that is going on, and like we said before, I kind of changed subjects on a tangent there. Thanks for that, Milo, for getting that question in there and diverting my attention. But when it comes to Bigfoot, do you think there is enough evidence out there to kind of show or prove what this creature is, or that it even truly exists?
Oh, let's just get down to the bottom line here on this subject. Yes, the evidence has been there, probably for quite a while. Same thing with ufology. The evidence has been there, and it's been suppressed. That's what I believe. There's different national security issues, supposedly, they slap on these kinds of subjects. And anybody who's been in the field long enough and heard these reports and studied the testimony would realize that if indeed there was a Bigfoot that was found or caught or shot, or they had physical evidence of it, it wouldn't see the light of day if the powers that be were able to jump on it, which they seem to always do. So even some of the DNA studies that have been done with hair samples, maybe feces samples and blood samples and those kinds of things, they never see the light of day as well, or they're discredited somehow, they say. So I think the evidence is there, has been there for a while, and we just need to somehow get a handle on those folks that are discrediting and withholding the evidence, to try to force them to get it out in the open.
If there is so much evidence out there, from footprints to scat samples to, hair samples, why has none of the DNA been proved yet? Or why do we see science or scientists refusing to even investigate this? There's only a few. Most of that evidence goes to Jeff Meldrum, who's already a believer.
Yeah. Well, here's my bottom line thought on this whole thing. If they do produce proof of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and actually have the scientific evidence of their DNA and those kind of things, they're going to find out that this is not an evolved species from Cro-Magnon man. They have never been able to prove the missing link of how modern man arrived here from the genetic stock that was on the planet before 6,000 years ago or whatever, even 50,000 years ago. All of a sudden, the human beings just popped up out of nowhere. And if it was explained how we were put here, whether we were tweaked by an extraterrestrial civilization from the stock that was already on the planet for millennia and millions of years, that would be a shocker that would be akin to the disclosure of alien presence on the planet. So I believe that that's what the scientific evidence is going to show, but they don't want to show that for quite a while because of the devastation it's going to make on people's thought processes and psyche if they do it right away.
Wouldn't the scat samples be something that really proves that this animal exists, if it doesn't line up with any other DNA found from any animals in the area.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. But, you're talking about the folks in charge of these kinds of issues and stuff. Let's just take the Smithsonian Institute, for instance. One of their jobs is to go around and find the anomalous archaeological finds in the country and suppress them. You don't see very many giant skeletons, even though even in the Bible they've been alluded to, and people have got testimony of finding them as well. So you've got organizations out there that are just there to suppress any kind of anomalous evidence that is found. And if you found, for instance, the Bigfoot scat and it was analyzed correctly, you would definitely find DNA, I would imagine, that would be totally separate than a Gigantus pithecus or the hominids that are on the planet. They're probably so far different. It would lend to the story that these folks have a whole different genetic evolution, and or they were placed here off planet at some point.
The reason why I ask in regards to the scat samples is there is evidence. We know there is evidence, yet it's still defying scientific measurement or accuracy as to why so many people do not want to test this subject out. Are there scientists in Washington State doing what Jeff Meldrum is doing in Utah, or what John Bindernagel is doing here up in British Columbia?
I think the crack in the dam is getting bigger and bigger just because of personalities like Jeff Meldrum and Professor Bindernagel. Great people in the field, and these folks are kind of opening the eyes of some of these scientific folks out there who will be eventually, hopefully, willing to look into this. I think a good example was what Dr. Roger Lear did, for instance, with the alien implant evidence, supposedly. What he did is he got individual laboratories that had no clue about what they were going to investigate or analyze. He didn't tell them that these things were coming from folks who claimed to be alien implants. He just wanted to know what the isotopic ratios of these things were. And of course, what happened was that they came back multiple times from different sources after the analyzing and said that these are isotopic ratios that don't even come from our solar system. So if we can get like blind studies, perchance, for instance, of the DNA hair or scat of a Bigfoot, and Dr. Meldrum or whoever can get independent laboratories to test them without tipping them off, obviously, of what they're trying to come up with or what they're showing them, that might shed some light on this whole issue of, the evidence that we have and how can we show that it is indeed evidence and proof, a standard of proof that is there by scientific investigation.
So when it comes to Sasquatch, what do you think this creature is? Why haven't we been able to prove it scientifically? And the reason why I ask that is because the more I look at this, and the reason why we haven't proved it scientifically as of yet, is because I lean towards the millennia of stories that indigenous people across North America have been saying about this creature, and I think we're looking in the wrong places, or using the wrong techniques to prove its existence. Your opinion?
Yeah. Well, obviously the Native Americans, the indigenous folks in Canada, all over the place, have come up with these oral traditions for generations upon generations, and And of course, I would put more credence into oral tradition than in individual sighting reports, obviously, because these are something that has been passed down for hundreds of years, and probably have very much detail in their sighting reports. But the real bottom line is we can't be naive in this regard, because we know that there are powers that be out there that even if we could come up with evidence that would be indisputable, they are going to hide that evidence. They are going to co-opt that evidence. That seems to be the pattern of any of these things that go against the evolutionary process that they're trying to put forth, from Darwin. So the UFOs the same way. There's certain organizations that are so powerful and so omnipresent that they can scoop up this evidence, even if we had it, and keep it from coming out. Look what happened with the JFK assassination information. My goodness, I can't believe that it's almost been 54 years since some of this evidence was released, and some of it was finally released. But of course, I think there's a lot more that hasn't been released and or damaging that we don't even know in that regard too, in that issue. But that seems to be a theme throughout the whole issue of disclosure in any regard, is to suppress the information as long as possible.
Do you think then, like aliens, that the government is suppressing information on Sasquatch?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I believe it's in their best interest. For instance, I don't know if this would be on the same level as disclosure of extraterrestrial presence on Earth, but it sure would mess up a whole lot of folks' religions, let's say, if, for instance, they found out that the Bigfoots were not a Gigantopithecus, and or were not an evolutionary arm of Cro-Magnon man, and all of a sudden they seem to have had a separate lineage here on this planet. That would really mess up a lot of people's thinking, and I think that they definitely don't want to do that at this point until they can prepare the folks out there in society for the shock of what could happen if they disclosed the true lineage and of Bigfoot.
I want to switch topics because you have talked about Tom DeLonge about 5 or 6 times on this show already tonight. What do you think's up with him? Are you buying his story?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because, the famous Canadian ufologist, Grant Cameron, I think has got a real good bead on this whole subject. He has written a book recently. I can't remember what the title is, but it's the idea that he has identified 4 or 5 what he calls them messiahs, actually, that come out with certain areas of ufology and have been kind of promoted, let's say, by the powers that be. We've got Stephen Greer on one end, who says aliens are good. We've got Tom DeLonge, relative newcomer, on the other end that says aliens are questionable and probably bad, and we need to deal with them through the military might that we have to make sure that we're not co-opted or taken over by them. But Grant Cameron says that this is just a strategy, basically, of the deep state, where they promote various and different points of view on a certain subject. Ufology is one. And what they do is muddy the waters, confuse people, and keep them fighting amongst themselves in the field so that the real disclosure that's going to happen down the road is pushed farther and farther along until they've acclimated enough folks so that society doesn't destroy itself upon disclosure. I really enjoy Grant Cameron. I was able to spend a bunch of time with him and had breakfast with him and myself just more than a year and a half ago at the local McMiniman's McMinnville UFO Festival, and he is a sharp guy. I swear he gets downloads from somewhere out of the blue and is able to just relay the information that he's put together over years and years. I think he started in the early 70s in the field of ufology. So I really enjoy his point of view in that regard.
I highly respect Grant as well, and he will actually be on this show in 22 days talking about his knowledge of Tom DeLonge and what is going on there, because Grant has actually been a very critical voice in what he believes is government disinformation, and he thinks DeLonge has almost become a shill or a patsy towards this latest leg of disclosure. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with Grant's assessment in that regard. He's been around long enough. Matter of fact, at one point in his career, probably about 10 years ago, he tried to get out of the field of ufology because he says it's just not going anywhere. He can't prove anything. But then again, he sees these people like Tom DeLonge kind of raised to a level of importance by the powers that be, and he actually has some high-level insiders that are on his team now. And so he sees this coming down the road, and he says, I've got to speak up and say that this is kind of what they do. It's a disinformation process. He says what they'll do is they'll give out some truth within a whole bunch of disinformation, and they will, make sure that it flies for a while. Then they'll pull back the truth and maybe even discredit the person who's giving it. For instance, Tom DeLonge might be discredited down the road for some reason. But the fact that they got the information out to begin with, and the fact that people have heard these allegations and information about potential realities, that's what they need. They don't necessarily have to make sure that it sticks. They just need to throw a bunch of stuff on the wall, and eventually most of it's going to stick, and people will be used to those terms and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I'm thinking that that's probably what's going on here with the recent disclosure, which I believe is what I believe the Tom DeLonge actually disclosure and seminar that he put on with his whistleblower insiders and stuff is the beginning of soft disclosure, of a real effort. Of course, Grant Cameron was the one that said this. He says in January of 2016, there was some kind of a meeting, he says, with some of the powers that be who have decided that it's time to actually start this process, that it's they're getting some kind of pressure, and I don't know where that's coming from, off planet or whatever, that they have to start the process, and they can't wait any longer. That's directly from Grant Cameron. So I'm assuming, because of all the quickening that's going on, that this is just a side effect of the idea that they have to now get people used to these real truths out there.
And I can understand where we need to do that. I really do understand where we need to do that, okay? But there is, I think, some fear-mongering going on here, okay? And if you go to spacedoutradio.com, click on the news tab, and go to Dave's blog, you can read my latest blog on it that came out on Monday in regards to this process, okay? And DeLonge is on record stating that all aliens are bad. We need to keep them out of here. We need to arm space with nuclear weapons, okay? And we need to protect ourselves from these evil little bastards as much as we can. Yeah. Yet, if you go to Dr. Edgar Mitchell's free experiencers website, which is experiencer.org,
yes,
here's some of the statistics. Okay? Experiences with different types of beings, 55% saw energy beings, 52% human-like beings, 50% small grays, and it goes down from there. Here's the interesting statistics. Over 85% of the people who took this test claimed their contact with non-human I don't know what the IB stands for, NHIBs, has been positive. 84% of those people do not want their contact experiences to stop. 9.7% believe aliens are bad or malevolent.
Yes. Interesting.
Okay. That is a massive swing. A massive swing to what Tom DeLonge and the To the Stars Academy are saying about aliens.
Yes.
So if real people are having such a positive effect... I'm going to read these stats here first. How did ET contact change your life? 4.3% say highly negative effect on changing your life. 6.7% said slightly negative. 16.5% said neutral. 21.7% said slightly positive. 50.9% highly positive effect on the way it changed their life.
Yeah, amazing.
The one thing about numbers, yes, numbers can be skewed to whatever way you want them, okay? But if you're doing an honest statistic, numbers don't lie.
Right. Yeah, and I would trust Edgar Mitchell's organization to do that, to do just that.
Well, we need to know.
Yeah.
So my question is, just by listening to those stats, do you think there is a government agenda that Tom DeLonge is the anti-Stephen Greer?
Yes. Yeah, I believe so. That's exactly what Grant Cameron was mentioning, is the fact that in any disinformation campaign, the whole goal initially is to divide and conquer your enemy, which would be the public in this regard. And so if they can promote disparaging views on this whole idea, they're going to get us fighting amongst ourselves in questioning which side is correct. The whole idea of the fact that these extraterrestrials are good or bad is kind of an interesting conundrum, because what we're doing in that regard is lumping them all possibly into one batch. What if we've got some extraterrestrials out there that are not doing a good job for us, or want to prey upon us for some reason? And of course, we've got others out there that want us to ascend to a higher consciousness level and want to help us. So I would imagine we're dealing with more than, of course, one race or one group of people. I think in this, it would be outrageous for us to think that we're dealing with one extraterrestrial race in the entire universe or local area of our galaxy, when we used to think that we were the only ones in the universe.
Does it come down to the fact that this is just fear-mongering?
Yes. The whole idea is that if you can keep any organism in fear, then you can keep it from fighting against you. You can weaken it and control it. That's the basic idea of the media. Let's put it that way. They realize there's just way too many of us. If we ever got together and decided that we were going to correct something, and so they have to fearmonger all of us through these various opportunities with whatever we look at every day, and try to keep us from organizing ourselves together against them.
Here's what doesn't make sense to me, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this. If aliens, as DeLonge stated, have been coming here for millennia,
Yeah.
Why would they wait until we were nuclear capable of putting nuclear weapons in space or defending ourselves to take us over, when they could have maybe done it less than 100 years ago, where, machine guns were just being used, or even go back 150, 200 years ago before the guns, 300 years ago before guns, when the weapon of choice was a spear or a bow and arrow?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that is a major flaw in what he is saying.
Well, it is, of course. The only thing I suppose that the late Jim Mars would have said at one point is that, he was always fond of saying this, the children have found the matches, so we need to act now. If for instance, since the 40s or whatever, we actually came up with nuclear bombs and capabilities, maybe they are worried about that just now. But of course, on the other flip side of that, we're seeing testimony from credible sources in the military that says that these UFOs can shut down nuclear missile sites in a split second if they want to. So yeah, it's a real conundrum. You're right. I think that does discredit the Tom DeLonge point of view in that regard. But then again, if we're dealing with, for instance, multiple races and entities coming from other areas in this planet, maybe we are not dealing with them in a force that we can generalize. We have to. Here's the bottom line, and God forbid this is correct, but what if Tom DeLonge is correct and Stephen Greer is both correct? They're both correct. Then we're having to deal with, like any other institution or country or organization, there's a whole lot of interesting people that make up that entity that sometimes we have to deal with. So that's the only thing I can think of.
Well, I do believe they are both correct. I do believe there's benevolent extraterrestrials and there's very bad aliens that do some horrific things to people. I would fully agree. I would fully agree. I mean, I'm not naive enough to sit here and say that the 7.6 billion people that are on Earth are all good people. There's some nasty ones out there, and there has been throughout history. I mean, that's just written record. There's no woo-woo about that at all.
Yes.
So the whole point that I'm getting at is, if aliens were so bad, it would have been easier to take us over less than 100 years ago. If they wanted us for slavery, because we hear that they want to enslave us. We hear that they want to, make us the main course in their dinners at their dinner table for Thanksgiving or whatever they choose to celebrate. Okay, we hear all of that. If that is true, why wait until we can arm space? To me, and this is just my opinion, curious to get yours, it sounds like they're only doing this and coming up with this fear-mongering tactic through DeLonge in order to put nuclear weapons in space and give them a reason.
Yeah. Well, as far as that goes, I'm sure we already have nuclear weapons in space. Let's put it that way. I don't think that's the main agenda. I think the main agenda is to keep us fearful, of course, to try to control the masses here during this process of slow disclosure or partial disclosure, whatever they're doing. It doesn't make sense. You're right. In either one of those regards, that they would wait this long to try to clamp down on us when in reality we do have potentially some ability to strike back. But I think we're probably dealing with even a bigger picture here. Maybe even there is something called the Galactic Council out there who is maybe orchestrating something from a higher level as well through these various entities that might be visiting this planet for generations upon eons for natural resources or whatever they're doing with us. So I don't know the answer, but I sure would be interested to see how all of this shakes out as we get further, because I believe there is some kind of a quickening happening, some urgency in this disclosure for some reason. And I'm just, for one, happy to be alive in this time to be able to witness it and hopefully be a positive part of this whole disclosure process.
Well, so am I. I mean, let's face it. I think if it happens in our lifetime, we're all in for a real treat, even though I still think we are decades away from any sort of formal disclosure on the whole ET subject. The concern right now is, if let's play devil's advocate. On one hand, we have Stephen Greer, who is saying all of his government sources saying we're friends with aliens. And on the other hand, we have Tom DeLonge now saying that all of his government sources are saying that we got to watch out. These guys are out to harm us and take us over.
Yeah.
Then you have Hollywood in the middle that seems to side with the negativity. Video games seem to side with the negativity.
Right. Exactly.
Yet if you go by free statistics, it shows the positivity in these interactions with people. So I'm curious, as someone who has been taught to kind of read between the lines on things, where do you read between the lines, or where should the public read between the lines to try and find this answer?
Yeah, I think what's happening in a general way is that there is an awakening happening out there. People are becoming more discerning. For instance, let's just say the recent Las Vegas shooting, that whole issue was thrown into doubt immediately almost upon it happening, and certain other potentially false flag episodes have been kind of examined in a new light nowadays. People are actually, I think, waking up. It's going to be slow. We got the 80-20 rule going, of course, on this planet, where 20% of the people are interested, the 80% are sheeples. So we need to change that percentage a little bit more, and I believe it's happening slowly but surely. I think people are realizing that there are misinformation out there. There is information out there that is disparaging and dichotomized, and they need to be more discerning on how to tell what's really happening out there, rather than just listening to one news source on the network or newspapers or whatever. I'm always a positive, I always have positive expectation about the power of the human being to discern, even through disinformation processes. So that's been my goal, is to kind of bring the truth that I see it, in other words, to the folks out there that really have no clue and no interest, and hopefully put it in a palatable form where they will be interested and have a clue.
What did you think about Tom DeLonge's comments about Roswell? There was a couple of interesting ones. At first, during the Joe Rogan podcast, he basically stated that he thought it was one of the German Bells that crashed in Roswell. It was not alien at all. Then he said there was some sort of Greek writing on the UFO from Roswell. Ancient Greek writing.
I heard him.
And then, here's the other thing that I find interesting. If he's such a ufologist, why did he not talk about the crash at San Augustine, which happened at the same time as Roswell?
Yeah, exactly. Tom DeLonge, of course, as you can tell, is an intelligent person, but he's a young guy. There's no way that even in the last 10 years he would be able to get up to speed on all of these history events and things in the field of ufology. And the whole idea that he comes up with, that this Roswell issue was was a crashed German machine. I just thought that was hilarious. And it would be very difficult for me, if I was in his position, to be able to say those things with a straight face. I mean, that is just amazing that he could come out and actually say something like that. Given all the research that's been done and all the evidence and witnesses or whatever that have gone through this over the years, at least since the 1980s, to come out with something like that, that's a whole new twist. That's almost like the crash dummy twist that they put on it a few years back. And I think it's just probably one of those things that he has been told to say as part of the disinformation program to keep people wondering what the heck's going on and confused.
Do you think that his project, even though it's garnering some interest, will get off the ground?
You know, it depends on his handlers. If the handlers can keep his story straight and they want him to succeed, he will succeed. Of course, as you know, Stephen Greer has been through a couple of interesting iterations in his whole process where some of his associates have actually died of cancer and other things that have been kind of coincidental. Dr. Greer, I believe himself, has been a cancer survivor. So, you know, they'll have to determine whether Tom DeLonge is useful for the long run or not. That's what they're going to determine, whether he can hold the public and or the young people. That's what they need to get at next, and I believe that's what they're using Tom DeLonge for. The younger generations really didn't necessarily have an interest in this whole field, and I think they're looking, like you mentioned, Dave, 60 to 80 years down the road before they actually disclose the bottom line, and they're got a process together to bring the young people along for when they're the older folks, they won't freak out at that point.
We only got a couple minutes left with you tonight, and I want to get to Andrew's question on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. He is asking, Michael, have you heard of, and if you have, what did you think of Congresswoman Dana Rohrabacher's question to NASA about the idea of an ancient civilization on Mars?
Very interesting. I think it takes a lot of guts to probably even pose that question to NASA. But I think I would relate that to the kind of soft disclosure that they're pushing on Antarctica at this point. The whole idea of disclosure being pushed down the road farther and farther until the public can handle it, I believe that's kind of what they're doing with Antarctica, for instance. There's always been questions about Mars and all that kind of stuff. There's got to be a reason why she was comfortable enough to even ask that question. Let's put it that way. I don't know how many Congress people's planes have inadvertently crashed if they weren't following the party line. That's happened in the past before, and so somehow, some way, she was comfortable in asking this question, and that shows me that this is part of potentially the soft disclosure campaign that might be put on a front burner for some reason, as Grant Cameron has been mentioning.
My friend, we're about to wrap things up quickly here. Tell people where they can find information for yourself and UFOiTeam.
Well, you can always go to Facebook, of course. You can look Michael W. Hall up in Facebook, and you can look up the UFOiTeam with a lowercase I. And we really appreciate your opportunity that you've given us tonight, Dave, to talk with you for this period of time.
Anytime, my friend, anytime. You hold on. I'm going to wrap things up here. Michael W. Hall, our guest tomorrow night on the program, Corrine DeWinter. We're talking dimensions, intuition, and so much more starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. In the background, you hear Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo, rocking us out of the show. Mr. Bumblefoot is the official sound of Spaced Out Radio. Want to say thank you to everyone on my team for making this show get bigger and better every single day. If you need your news section, go to the Encounter online. We got some great news stories on there that are up to date for you. And most of all, we say thank you to everyone on Twitter, everyone in the chat rooms, and those of you who are listening at home or driving in your car for just hanging out with us tonight. We really appreciate it. You guys sharing our show, talking about it to your friends, going all over social media, giving us likes, because together, my friends, that's how we grow, because together, we own the night. Talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. You need to take us home. We're out. Good night.